Welcome back to the Climb the Pocket YouTube page. My name is Steve. I'm with Nick Script here with P2W Fantasy. We're going to be talking some overhyped or maybe some players that are getting a lot of hype players, and we're going to, determine whether we think that you should draft them at their current ADP. Like I said, I'm here with Nick with P2W. Nick, what's going on? Why don't you give the people a little information about your website?
What's up, Steve? Thanks again for having me on. I think the minute you hit me up and said, "Hey, let's make something. Let's get together for a video," I've been anticipating that ever since. Again, P2W Fantasy. You can find us on Twitter at P2W Fantasy. Growing a lot on there. We have a website, p2wfantasy.wordpress.com. Once we get a little bit more big time, maybe we can adjust that URL. But we're just punching out a bunch of articles. We got the podcast going. YouTube channel, so we're just trying to find some different ways to push out some content. And thanks again for having me on today.
Yeah, definitely, man. I'm excited to talk to you about these players who are getting a lot of hype, and we're going to talk about whether we would draft them at their current ADP or whether their hype is just getting a little bit too high and their ADP is going a little out of our comfort range. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. But right before that, go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like this video today. Give us a thumbs up. Drop a comment on players that you think are getting a little too much hype or players that you're buying in on the hype on. We love to engage. We'll answer every comment below. We have nothing but time, so we love to help you guys out, help you win fantasy football championships. So let's go ahead and get into the video. Our first player that we're going to talk about is Chris Godwin. Now, last year, Chris Godwin was everyone's fantasy darling. He was probably the most hyped player last year in 2019, and he definitely showed out. Last year he had a fantastic season, caught over 1,300 yards, 86 balls, 9 touchdowns. I mean, what more can you ask for a guy you got in like the 4th or 5th round? Fantastic value. Their offense, he's on an offense that's probably one of the best on paper this year with Gronk, with Keyshawn Vaughn, 3rd round draft pick, RB, a lot of upside for him. O.J. Howard, Cam Brate, Mike Evans, and Tom Brady loves to throw those tight ends. So there's definitely a lot of buzz in Tampa Bay, and a lot of people are viewing Chris Godwin as like a Julian Edelman type, or at least Tom Brady's Julian Edelman, which would probably boost up those reception numbers. How do you view Chris Godwin this year?
Well, like you said, last year he just balled out, and he was wide receiver 2 only to Michael Thomas. Top 10 wide receiver in snaps, routes, yards, and touchdowns. So you look at the different categories, and he was definitely a stud. I'm not as high on the Chris Godwin hype train as other people are. I think there's just a lot of red flag factors that say that he's not going to finish as a top 2 wide receiver, or maybe not even a top 5 wide receiver. I think this Tampa Bay defense, I don't think gets talked about enough. It said that, I read an article just on the defense saying that 11 out of the 12 top snap guys on defense were coming back, and they added some guys in the draft as well. Antoine Winfield, some other guys there. Tom Brady, obviously, a lot of people look at him as a GOAT. But if you look at having a good defense and a vet quarterback that is a great game manager, I don't think that screams the sort of season that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had last season, where you had Jameis Winston, slinging the ball a crazy amount of times and, chasing a lot of games. I kind of just see this Tampa Bay offense having a shift of the game script. I think they're going to be good on defense. I think Tom Brady is going to manage that offense well. I think he's going to utilize more players than the Bucs really did last season. Chris Godwin, I think, is going, I looked up wide receiver 6, depending on, the site you're looking at for his ADP. I just like a couple guys that are going after him a lot more. I mean, Kenny Golladay, DJ Moore, his teammate Mike Evans is interesting too. I know Godwin could be that, new slot Edelman sort of guy, but, the big red flag for me also was he broke out in his 3rd year. We've seen him do it one time. We've seen a guy like Mike Evans have great years multiple times. So, yeah, I'm not as high on the Chris Godwin train as others. I think he'll be very good. I just don't think he'll be, that wide receiver 2 sort of player going into 2020.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting him in the 2nd round, so like I personally would rather like him fall to me in the 3rd round, kind of where Mike Evans is going. I'd feel a lot more comfortable, just because I'd rather get like 2 running backs and then have Mike Evans or, like you said, DJ Moore or possibly Kenny Golladay in the third round as my wide receiver 1. I'd rather take that. I think what happened with Chris Godwin last year is pretty much his ceiling, especially with Jameis slinging the ball. I mean, he had 1,000 more passing yards than Tom Brady last year. They threw the ball a similar amount of times, which is actually pretty surprising, but 1,000 more yards for Winston and, over 15 yards per reception for Godwin, 11 yards per target. I think those numbers are going to come down, especially if you're buying into the fact that he's going to be his Julian Edelman type guy. It's going to be a lot more short dink and dunk passes, which I think Godwin's going to be great after the catch, but I don't know if he's going to be able to hit those numbers, those receiving numbers, maybe those touchdown numbers, especially with all those tight ends in the play with Cam Brate, O.J. Howard, Gronk is back with him. So, like you mentioned, a lot of guys there to throw the ball to, I think, and their defense, like you said, doesn't get talked about enough. So I think there's going to be a lot of spread going around, and I don't know if I'd be willing to take him in round 2, which was where a lot of the fantasy experts are going. I've seen a lot of mock drafts lately and league drafts for those guys, and they're taking Godwin pretty high, and I don't think I'm buying into that sort of hype. I think third round I'd feel a lot more comfortable. So let's go ahead and move on to our second player. We got Kenyan Drake for the Arizona Cardinals. His current ADP is around 22. You can get him around the late second round of the 12-man league. He's going as RB12 off the board. Now, last year he played 8 games with Arizona. He had 123 attempts with them for 643 yards and 8 touchdowns. Now, that does include one game where he had 4 touchdowns, and he had 3 out of those 8 games with over 110 yards. So those are kind of some outlier games. The rest of the games, he only averaged 45 yards a game. So he's not like he didn't come off as a super consistent guy. He ended the last 3 games, 2 of those games, he had over 110 yards, like I mentioned. I think it was 130 and then like 160 in one of those. He had the 4 touchdowns. So it's kind of like a recency bias sort of thing, and we'll go over that with another player later. I think that kind of gets in a lot of people's head. I think Kenyan Drake, early on in the offseason, maybe wasn't so high up. I think his ADP definitely took a pretty good rise up, and now it's kind of leveled out where he's at as RB12. For me, I actually personally do have him higher. Just on the tape I've watched, and of those good games, he looks really, really good, and I really am high on the Cardinals offense. I really like Kyler Murray this year. I like that they brought in DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if that defense is going to get that good, so that might be that downfall for him, because as the defense is on the field more, your offense is on the field less, and you're not going to be able to run the ball as much. So that would be a downfall for him. Catches the ball out of the backfield a little bit, 26th in the league in yards after the catch, which isn't that great. But he's that's yards after contact, and then 4th in the league in yards before contact, which is pretty good. I like Kenny Drake. I think I'd take a shot on him at his current ADP. I've seen him go, the ADP here says 22nd, which is late second round. I've seen him go in the first round in some mocks, which that's a little too uncomfortable for me. If I'm going to go RB, like get a Derrick Henry, then Kenyan Drake, because that's my plan, I'm happy with that. But him as my RB1 is kind of risky. I don't know how you're feeling about that.
Yeah, I think it is risky to a degree. I might just have a soft spot for Drake. He gave the page a shout out recently. Some say it was a paid for cameo, but actually your buddy at Bootleg Fantasy was quoted saying it was free because they have swag. So I think I might just have
Ryan.
A little soft spot for him because of that. But yeah, I'm not gonna go too much off the numbers you talked about, but weeks 9 through 17 with the Cardinals, RB4 during that time, 79% of snaps he was on the field for with the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. We look back at previous seasons with the Dolphins, obviously a completely different system, different coaching staff, this and that. He finished in the past 2018 RB14, 2017 RB33, so nothing to stand out there. But I read something recently about Drake. It was a little note that said he hit 15 miles per hour in 26.8% of rushes versus the 14.9 with Miami this past season. So I think the system plays out for Drake to be successful. I think, I'm not sure the longevity of him being on the Cardinals. I think that might be up in the air long term, but as long as he is in this system, I think the offense has improved, obviously, through the Hopkins signing. But I like Drake. Like you said, I think I would probably rank him higher as far as where I would draft him. So I think if you are in a draft and he's on the board and you're looking at the situation that some of these other guys are in, he's going to be a guy that's going to get tons of touches in 2020. I think he is set up to be very successful. So kind of like you said, I'm going to take the shot, and I'm going to go with Drake 2020. So I do actually like Kenyan Drake.
Yeah, I like him too. To be clear, I am buying out on the hype because I'm higher than RB12 on him. I think he's my RB8. So I like that. And like I said, in a perfect scenario, I get 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, and RB Drake Drake is my RB2, and that would be fantastic. If I got Michael Thomas and got Drake in the second round, I wouldn't be too unhappy about that either. So buying in on the hype on Kenyan Drake. Let's go ahead and move on to our third player, his gunsling quarterback, Kyler Murray, in his second season. So he had a pretty fantastic rookie season last year. Rushed for 500 yards, threw the ball over 550 times, 3,700 yards, 20 to 12 touchdown to interception ratio, 4 rushing touchdowns, just an overall dynamic playmaker. Pretty interesting stat. He actually only 2.3% of his passes got intercepted, which is actually a pretty stellar number for a rookie quarterback. If you watch game tape on Kyler Murray, you will see he is like extremely accurate. So any woes that you thought you saw in year 1, I think they're just gonna go away in year 2. And I see him like honestly primed for like an MVP running season, like a Lamar Jackson type season. I don't know about the numbers, how they all match up with who's gonna play well this season, but he's gonna go on a run this year, and he's gonna be in the top 5 candidates for an MVP season. I can totally see it. So like his current ADP right now is 59th overall. He is a late 5th round pick, QB4, right behind Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, and Pat Mahomes. So if I can get Kyler Murray in the 5th round and I'm going early on quarterback, like if you're not taking the earlier quarterback train or, train like Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, and you want to get that second tier, that Dak, that Kyler, Deshaun Watson tier right there, I think Kyler would be the perfect guy to have on your team. Just the rushing yards alone, 544 on the ground last year. I think that's a floor for him. I think he goes up from there. He's just super dynamic. We expect this offense to get better. They improved the offensive line. They drafted Josh Jones out of Houston in the 3rd round, a first-round talent that some people actually thought that he would get drafted 8th overall by the Cardinals, and they ended up getting him in the 3rd round. So that's definitely encouraging that they're boosting up that offensive line. I don't think it's going to be a top half of the offensive line, but he got sacked 48 times last year, which was bottom 3 in the league. So that's a lot of times to get sacked, especially for a rookie quarterback of his size. It worries you. You're like, okay, can this guy hold up? Is he going to get injured or whatnot? So the fact that they're doing stuff with their offensive line, trying to make it better, is definitely encouraging. And I see that number going down a little bit this year. And with Kyler getting a little more elusive and aware of everything and just becoming a better NFL quarterback, that offense just developing with Cliff Kingsbury, I think everything's just going to go in a better direction for this year. So what we saw last year, he was a top 10 QB. I think it just only goes up from there. And honestly, I'll say it right now, I'm buying into the hype that he's going to be no worse than a top 5 quarterback. How do you feel?
That's some big hype right there, and especially with the MVP talks.
I'm not saying he's the MVP. I'm just saying I think he's going to have a run as far as being the conversation. Right. I don't know if he's going to be the MVP. It's kind of, I feel like Pat Mahomes is like locked in MVP guy for like the next 10 seasons. Like he's going to be the number 1 favorite every year, and I wouldn't say Kyler's going to be the favorite, but I think he's going to make a show, kind of like a Wentz-like season from a few years ago.
Yeah. I like Kyler Murray a lot. I've been seeing him go, as high as the 3rd quarterback off the board, even above Dak at times. I think I looked at Fantasy Pros and they actually listed him as QB3 above Dak. But last season, rookie quarterback, he balled out. Like you said before, the rushing upside is huge. I think it's fantasy gold if you have a quarterback that can rush. There was 3 games he had 10 plus rushing attempts, so that right there is going to get you fantasy points if we're just talking about fantasy football. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins coming, that's a huge improvement to the offense. Obviously, you got the vet in Larry Fitzgerald, and Christian Kirk, I think, needs to show us a little bit more. Tight end wise, they don't have a lot to speak of. I think it's Arnold, their guy there. But Hopkins is going to go though from a guy, with Watson. I looked at the yards per attempt, 7.8, and the one knock on Murray I kept seeing was the 6.9 yards per attempt. The completion percentage was not bad. He was 15th in that though. And the touchdowns were pretty good. He finished, I think, QB8, but I'm not going to put him above some other guys personally. I think the offense is going to be well rounded. They're gonna run, whether it's him or Drake. I think Hopkins is obviously a big boost there. But looking at the Dax and Watson and even Carson Wentz for me, I'm not sure if I want to put him above all these guys just yet. I think I want to see how this offense shapes up in year 2. I don't think he's going to regress at all. I think he'll still 100% be a top 10 quarterback, but I don't know if I want to put him, right behind Mahomes and Jackson right now, and maybe even Dak. I think I'm a little bit lower on him going into year 2 than other guys, but I still think he'll be very successful. I think personally, I just have a couple more quarterbacks above him. Not a lot, but definitely not where I'm going to have him as QB3 or 4 right now.
Yeah, it's understandable. A guy like Dak, who's proven it, coming off his best fantasy season, and a guy like Russell Wilson, who's criminally undervalued every single year. I think this year he's probably going to get the most hype that he's ever gotten, recently. For some reason, every year people underdraft Russell Wilson. I don't think it's going to happen this year. He's just too consistent. So, I could see why you're a little down on him. So you're pretty much kind of thinking he's going to finish somewhere where he did last year. So it's not buying in on the hype, but it's also not buying out of it. Maybe you'd rather take a few other quarterbacks if you're going to go at this point in the draft at that spot. So let's go ahead and move on to the 4th player. We got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the new running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, drafted in the first round. At the end of the first round, a guy Patty Mahomes personally endorsed and said, "I want Clyde." So he's on the team. He's going 30th overall, mid-third round pick, RB 15 off the board. And I'll just start my stance right now and say, I don't know if I'd take him right there. It is kind of matter what you do in the draft up into that point. If you already have 2 running backs in your team, or you drafted CMC and then got a great wide receiver in the second round, and you want to take Clyde as your RB2, that's fine, because Christian McCaffrey is going to give you more than just one running back's worth of numbers. He's going to get you 1.5 running backs worth of numbers, or possibly more, probably more. He's done that in the past. So taking a guy like Clyde, you can take that risk, but I want to minimize risk in the first 4 rounds. And to me right now, Damian Williams is going to be the starter week 1. Like, I have no doubt about it. He's going to be the guy out there taking snap number 1. Now, I don't know whether or not that lasts. It seems like in the past that they always like to use one running back. We saw that when Jamal Charles was there. We saw it with Kareem Hunt when he was on the team. He came in and he was like immediately the starter. He had a fantastic week 1 against the Patriots. I remember that first game a couple years ago when he was a rookie. It was just amazing. I drafted him in a few leagues and I was like, man, I just hit on that 4th round pick right there. So is Clyde that guy? That's the real question. And to me, I don't think he's that guy until he has a boom game. And when that boom game happens is going to be the question, because Damian Williams seems to have trouble with injuries the past few years. And I think the reason they took a running back is because they want a young guy that they don't necessarily have to invest too much money in after, the first couple of years. And a guy that's going to be on the field. And Damian Williams hasn't been able to stay on the field. So he's obviously a playoff and Super Bowl MVP type player. But now Clyde's here, and we see that he can be a fantastic pass catcher out of the backfield. With 55 catches last year at LSU, so super dynamic, over 1,800 yards, 17 touchdowns. Obviously a great offense that they were playing in. Joe Burrow had the best season of a college football player ever, college football quarterback. So being a part of that is definitely going to boost the numbers and whatnot. Like any rookie, there's going to be concerns about pass blocking and whatnot, but I don't like to throw that in there. If he's putting numbers up on the field, and he can pass or catch the ball out of the backfield, I think they're going to make it work with him, get him on the field. But the reason I'm not buying into the 3rd round hype is because I just don't know when that's going to happen. When is he going to get the majority of the touches in the backfield?
Yeah, I think I'm on the same boat as you. Obviously, it's the dream landing spot for Edwards-Helaire. He goes from the best offense in the country in college to arguably the best offense in the NFL with one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the league. But I think, and you kind of touched on this too, I think people want him to be like rookie Kareem Hunt so bad, but don't understand the difference in the variables that surround that. I mean, Kareem Hunt rookie year, 53 catches, 1,327 yards. The second most rushing attempts that year was from their quarterback, Alex Smith, who isn't like a Lamar Jackson sort of running back or anything. So I think people think that, this could be the next Kareem Hunt who's going to take the load and run with it. But Damian Williams is still on the team. I mean, you can argue he could have been the Super Bowl MVP, just balled out and showed, certain flashes and weeks when he actually was healthy. But if Williams is healthy, he's not going to disappear. I think he's going to take the bulk in 2020, in my opinion, of the rushing attempts. Maybe Edwards-Helaire is just the pass catching back, which, obviously that's a good thing if, you have a good offense and, you have Patrick Mahomes. But I mean, in college, he was very good. He was great at breaking tackles. He was like the number one rookie for pass catching. Andy Reid loves him. I know you talked about Patrick Mahomes, but what a lot of people don't understand with most of these rookie running backs is that they still have a vet on the team that's going to eat into their touches. And, I think dynasty-wise, Edwards-Helaire, if you want to take him early in a dynasty league, sure, maybe. And I think it depends on what you're drafting before him, like you said there. But, yeah, he's not going to be rookie Kareem Hunt where he gets everything, in that offense. So I think because of Damian Williams still being involved in that offense, I'm not as high on him right now, and I don't know the timeline of when he's going to be the guy for sure. Like you said as well, the first time he breaks out, everyone's going to be relieved because they probably took him number one in their rookie drafts and this and that. But I like him as a player in Dynasty. I like him in that offense, but I'm not taking him above a lot of other running backs who have better situations and clear-cut volume.
Yeah, this whole situation can change, obviously, if the same thing that happened to Kareem Hunt can happen. Like, Kareem Hunt had to beat out Spencer Ware, and Spencer Ware was injured in the preseason. So, like, Kareem Hunt was like, whoa, if you draft... I remember drafted Kareem Hunt, and, like, the same night Spencer Ware went down in the preseason. And it was, like, the most fulfilling thing ever. I was like, wow, I just got the biggest steal in the world. So, unless something like that happens with CEH... he's not going to have the same Kareem Hunt-like season. Kareem Hunt is really, really good. He doesn't actually get enough love for how good he is. And he was in the dream scenario in the Chiefs offense with no one to battle him out for touches. Yeah. So that's why he came in and got all the touches. But Damian Williams is still there, and as long as he's healthy, he's going to have his fair share of touches, if not more than CEH, like you mentioned. So let's go and move on to the fifth player on our list. We have Calvin Ridley for the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of people are slating Calvin Ridley in as this year's Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin, third-year receiver last year. And then we have Calvin Ridley coming into his third year here. And he, is a guy that's going 43 overall in the mid-fourth, which is around the time where I'm ready to start taking risk. A little more risk, because if it plays out, I'm going to hit big. So he's going wide receiver 18 right now. So in this scenario, I would hope that I get him as like my wide receiver 2 or whatnot, and hope that he can finish as a top 12 wide receiver. As far as targets go in the offense, I don't know if there's that many vacated targets because Austin Hooper leaves. Because they brought in Hayden Hurst, and I am pretty high on Hayden Hurst. I think he'll collect most of Hooper's targets. And Todd Gurley's in town. They didn't have much of a running game last year. They did have Devonta Freeman, who silently had a decent season, but I think Todd Gurley is a little better for them as long as he can stay healthy. They're both kind of pass-catching running backs, maybe Devonta Freeman a little bit more. I just don't know if there's a lot more targets for him. As long as Julio's there and they're continuing to use the tight end and pass to the running back out of the backfield, I don't know how Ridley takes like a giant jump. Sure, he can go for 1,008 touchdowns, but is that the kind of jump people are hyping him up to be? Like we said, Chris Godwin had 83 catches last year for over 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. So if people are predicting Calvin Ridley to be this year's Chris Godwin, can he even get close to those numbers? And my answer is no. I don't think he can. So it's all about settling your expectations, I guess. So if he's going to be this year's Chris Godwin for me, I guess I'm happy if he gets 1,100, 8 touchdowns again. I know his rookie season he had 10 touchdowns. So I'm not buying in on the Calvin Ridley hype, but I'm also not buying in on it. Like I'm pretty neutral about this pick right here. It's kind of depending on who I pick, like I mentioned before earlier on my first 3 picks. If he's my wide receiver 2, I'll be happy. But some people might take him as their wide receiver 1 after they slam 3 running backs in the first 3 rounds, and that I just would not feel comfortable with. How do you feel about Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm on the same boat. I think it comes down to perspective, like you said, of what you are hyping him up to be. I don't think he's gonna be, a wide receiver, the wide receiver too, like Chris Godwin was at the end of 2020. But I do see him not regressing from what he was last season. He missed 3 games, still had 93 targets for the year. Weeks 1 through 14 that he actually played, I think he was wide receiver 14, and Julio finishes in the top 3. So obviously, Matt Ryan has proven that he can support 2 guys to really ball out. I still think Julio is going to be their number 1 targeted player going into 2020. Matt Ryan was 3rd in attempts this past season, so the volume's there. I like Hayden Hurst. I don't think he takes all of the targets that Hooper vacated. I think that he's going to take a large chunk. I think Russell Gage is going to be involved. I think maybe Ridley gets some more now. But yeah, finishing wide receiver 14 and missing 3 games. If he would have played those 3 games, I mean, it's a big what if. But if he had one monster game in those 3, where would he have finished? So if he sneaks into the top 10 wide receivers, which would be a big maybe for me, but if he does, I think that he is going to be worth where he's being drafted at. And some guys you might argue, like a Cooper Kupp or Adam Thielen or Amari Cooper, I think they're usually going above him in drafts. I'm not going to say I will take him above those guys, but you could probably argue points to where you could take him just because of the volume that's there on the Falcons. Obviously, the quarterback's going to talk his guys up, but Matt Ryan said about Ridley recently, he's a guy I think could explode going into a year like this. And then he had a side note about Ridley mastering the system, and their offensive coordinator said that his routes and recognition of those routes are improving. So I think Calvin Ridley's set up to be a very good player. I think it's just your perspective, like you said, with a lot of these guys. I mean, if you expect Ridley to overtake Julio and be wide receiver 2 or 3 this year, I think you're reaching a little bit. If you say, hey, he missed 3 games, let's push him into the top 10 potentially, I think there's a chance for that if he doesn't regress. So again, just a perspective thing. I like Ridley a lot. I am a guy that wants Ridley on my teams, but with the mindset that Julio is still going to be Julio, even if he's 31 or 33, whatever the case is going to be.
Yeah, Julio, always criminally undervalued. Let's go ahead and move on to our 6th player. We got Tyler Higbee, tight end for the Los Angeles Rams. I'll just start off by saying this. I know we've talked about in other videos, 2 words, recency bias. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not in on Tyler Higbee, but I think that's what's really driving his ADP. I've been doing mock drafts all off season, and yes, I'm talking like January because I'm that big of a loser, but that's what I was doing. And he was a sleeper before. Trust me, he was a sleeper. But then his name gets passed around all over fantasy Twitter, all over the radio shows, everywhere, and now he's tight end 8. He's going in the early 7th, which just goes way up, and he's picked number 73 off the board. He's getting into that zone where, like, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. I'm starting to feel like maybe, what am I thinking? Because maybe I'm wrong. Because the recency bias, weeks 11 through 15 last year, he had 522 yards with 43 catches, a 16-game pace of over 1,600 yards and 138 catches. That ain't happening, but yeah. I feel like the rate at which he's moving up ADP charts and getting further up to the closer to the top, like 60 players, people are acting like that's going to happen. And man, if that happens, we better be taking him in the 1st round, like no doubt. Because what he did at the end of last season, it ain't going to happen again. It's not that I think he can't continue to be that type of playmaker for the offense, but recently, I'm pretty sure, I think it was Sean McVay came out and talked. I know it's just coach speak in the offseason, so it pretty much means nothing. But he said, they were talking about Gerald Everett and saying that we need to get Gerald Everett more involved. We want to get him more involved. We like what Tyler did last year, as in Tyler Higbee, but we need to get Gerald more involved. So, like, to me, that doesn't sound like they want to take Tyler Higbee and let him be their Gronk, So, and that's the way he's being drafted. I was all over Tyler Higbee until he got into the 70s in his ADP, and now I'm starting to think of every reason not to draft him. And I'm starting to think of sleepers like a guy like Jack Doyle I'd rather have, or a guy like Hayden Hurst, like I've talked about, that I can get as like tight end 13 or whatnot in like round 12. His ADP is going up a little bit too, but someone I feel a little bit more comfortable just waiting on. So how do you feel about Tyler Higbee, and just, based on the way he ended the season last year, do you think he'll be able to carry that over to this year?
And so Higbee is making an article that I'm working on right now, trying to push out soon about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of players, because he had 8 weeks where he was under 10 points in fantasy, that depending on your type of scoring, but then weeks 13 through 17, nobody in the league is finishing better than him. So we saw the reception count go crazy at the end of the season. He had 7 receptions twice, 12, 9, and 8 across a few games. But, was it a factor, because of Gerald Everett being hurt? I think I like Tyler Higbee better than Everett. I kind of was thinking that before anyways, but I think it was a situational sort of thing why he stepped up that much. With Everett coming back, and even their rookie Bryson Hopkins, I'm not going to say he's going to be involved right away, but he was a good player in college, and he was a great pass catcher. And the thing I read about Higbee that he was great at, or is great at, is pass blocking or run blocking. He's a good blocker. So I think Higbee is going to be essential to the team. If he does have the same, he's going to be our pass catching tight end role. Do I see him still being in a top 10 not wide receivers, tight ends? It's a potential there, but I think, like you kind of noted before, with so many sleepers at tight end being available later, I'm going to shy away from Higbee, because there's a big question mark to if he's going to be the guy or if he's going to split with some guys, or what the case is going to be. I think if you look at so many teams into 2020, they have a new starting tight end or a young guy that can break out. You got your Chris Herndons and your Irv Smiths and your Jonnu Smith, and you just go down Sternberger on the Packers. There's so many guys that could be good this year. So if you want to roll the dice later in drafts and take a couple of those young guys and have the expectation that, hey, if I have 2-3 young tight ends on my roster, maybe it's just 2 guys and one breaks out, you're fine then, right? You don't want to overdraft on Tyler Higbee with so many question marks going into the year, especially with his price probably being the highest it's going to be. Finishing the season the way he did, he's going to have a high price. If I owned Higbee, I'd probably sell him and put that note on there. Hey, Higbee was tight end number 1 in the league, 13 through 17. He's on the block, this sort of thing. So, yeah, I'm not as high on Higbee. He could be good, but it's a could be sort of thing.
Yeah, I like the strategy, like you mentioned, kind of taking 2 tight ends later, like a Noah Fant, like a Jack Doyle, hoping they both blow up, and then you can trade one of them. I always mention this in our videos. If you have 2 tight ends and you're able to trade one, same with quarterbacks, and someone wants to trade for you, oh, man, that's the best situation in fantasy football, because it doesn't mean much to your team, and you get probably a skill player as far as a wide receiver or running back coming back, so love that scenario. Let's move on to our last guy. It's wide receiver Diontae Johnson for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's gaining a lot of hype lately. He's kind of leveled out, but definitely was probably a close to last-round pick earlier in the offseason. Now he's moving up. He's made his way up to the early 10th round, 122 overall, wide receiver 46. His name gets tossed around a lot. Fantasy Twitter, the radio shows, everywhere, articles about him. It's coming up. I just don't know how I feel about this whole offense in general. Are they going to be productive? Are there going to be enough targets for him? They have Juju. They have Chase Claypool, new rookie. They have James Washington, who I'm not a fan of, but he's still there. Eric Ebron, a red zone threat. They have James Conner, who catches balls out of the backfield. They have Jalen Samuels. There's a lot of mouths to feed here. And, he's getting hyped up like he's going to have the Juju type season when Juju was there with Antonio Brown. And I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, obviously, everything was put on hold last year when everyone had to play with those horrible quarterbacks they were putting out there, Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph, when Big Ben went down. Everyone who drafted Juju in the second round got a wide receiver 66 finish. So that was just, a shot in the neck. It just sucked, So Big Ben's coming back. He's older. Some people are questioning his injury status. Is he going to be okay the whole season? And we don't know all these answers, And as a 10th rounder, if he goes any higher, it's not a risk, it's a shot. It's a shot you're willing to take. You're willing to throw this dart. Because later in these rounds, you throw your darts, and if you hit, you get rewarded. If you don't, you pick someone up off the waiver. It's not a big deal. The good thing about him, though, is he did lead all rookies last year with 59 catches. And this was horrible quarterback play. Like I said, the guys that I mentioned, personally, I don't think they're NFL quarterbacks. I think they're third stringers. So, that is very encouraging. And I think him and Juju could be a pretty dynamic duo. but we'll just have to wait and see. With not much risk going into this pick, being a 10th rounder, as long as he doesn't move up too much more, I think I'm buying into the hype. Like, I'm buying into the hype right now. That's it. If it goes any higher, I think I'd look other ways. I think I'd rather have like a guy like, I don't even know. I don't know ADPs off the top of my head, but like Golden Tate or something like that. I'd pick someone who I know that can do it, who is in a good offense. Like the Giants, good offense, I say. They have good playmakers there. They should be a pretty good offense with Daniel Jones and whatnot. I think I'd rather go with someone a little safer than a shot if he goes any higher than round 10. But right now, I don't mind Diontae Johnson's 10th round value. I don't think he's overhyped right now. I think he's perfectly hyped up. Now, if we keep talking about him like we are in this video, then I'm probably going to be out on him. How do you feel about Diontae?
Yeah, I think you noted that he was getting drafted somewhere in the 40s. I've seen him ADP wise high 30s, like 38 for wide receivers. But yeah, I think kind of like going off of what you're saying here. I think it's like a low to medium risk for a potential high reward. We've seen him with Big Ben in like one game, I think, and props to him for having a good rookie season at, wide receiver 39 and, depending on which league you're in. But we only saw 1 week with Big Ben, and then he had Mason and Duck Hodges, which is might have been the worst quarterback starts in the league this past year. But I think he's a guy that has the potential to be in your flex. I don't think you're going to start him as one of your wide receivers comfortably just because of what you said, the factors of how is this offense going to run? We know Big Ben and Juju have a connection. We've seen it for a full season. We've seen them, I know it's just off-season videos, but we've seen them linking up in some off-season videos. I'm also not a big James Washington guy, but did he have some good games last season? Yeah. So, does the offense recognize that he had some good games? Sure. Chase Claypool is a different type of wide receiver coming in, big body that they, rumored was going to be a tight end. He's another guy that's going to eat up some targets potentially, maybe not year one, but I'm sure in the future. And then also, like you said, Eric Ebron's a red zone guy. So I think with Big Ben, if he is healthy and he's going to play a full season, you like guys that are going to get the volume from him. Will he get the volume, or will he have to split between Washington and Claypool and Ebron? I don't know. We know that Juju's going to eat, or he should. But, yeah, I think it's a low to medium risk. But if it does pan out and he does have a pretty good volume like he did with these poor quarterbacks, then I think you'll have a good reward and have a guy that you could start in the flex with some upside just because Big Ben's going to want to throw the ball. If they run into any sort of situation, this is for any kind of wide receiver, but we've seen Big Ben, he's 38, I believe, and he had the season-ending injury. If something was to happen with him again, I think Diontae and everybody else's value kind of takes a massive hit. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the same sort of thing you said, just low to medium risk, and I'm going to say high reward if he pans out.
Yeah, another point to back up just his talent alone was he did an interview and mentioned that he played with a groin injury all year last year, ended up getting a sports hernia surgery in February. So, that's pretty encouraging that he was the best wide receiver as terms of receptions go the whole season last year, being injured, playing with those horrible quarterbacks. So it makes you think, what kind of talent are we dealing with here? He might be really good. Is there a world where he's better than Juju Smith-Schuster on this team? We don't know. That could be possible. If he hits and has a Juju season like he had in 2018, wow, that's going to be a league-winning talent right there, possibly for some teams.
Isn't Juju on a contract year? Is it this year or next year?
I feel like it's this year because I know there's some talks whether or not they wanted him back, and I think it might be this year.
So what if we're talking dynasty and we're talking about drafting Diontae with the long-term, chance of maybe Juju's not back and maybe it is Diontae as their number one guy. This is kind of stretching a little bit, but you never know. There's just different factors for so many things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that concludes our players that we think are either hyped or overhyped or anything around the hype train. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks, Nick, for being here. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers. We're about halfway there right now. If you guys could give us a subscription, we'd really appreciate it. Thumbs up this video. It really helps us grow. Drop a comment below of guys that you think are being overhyped right now, and we'll comment back. We love to engage with you guys. Go follow us on Twitter at Climb the Pocket. Follow Nick at P2W Fantasy. Find me at Steve 2.0. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.